Hello and welcome to Friday's show at the Wacky Bookshelf. For those new here, this channel is all about books you didn't know about. If you are a returning subscriber, we thank you for watching our videos and building the channel. We are a community of explorative readers, and we are always open to new book suggestions. All of our book reviews can be found in the description below, along with our merchandise and book blog. Please leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel for new content. Thank you for your support, and now on to today's book.
The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness, by Michelle Alexander, is a seminal work that examines the intricate and systemic racial discrimination present in the United States criminal justice system. Through meticulous research and compelling arguments, Alexander illustrates how the war on drugs and mass incarceration have functioned as a contemporary system of racial control, akin to the Jim Crow laws of the early 20th century. The book is structured to guide the reader through a historical, sociological, and legal analysis of the criminal justice system, highlighting how policies ostensibly designed to be race-neutral have disproportionately impacted African Americans. Alexander argues that mass incarceration has effectively created a racial caste system, where millions of Black Americans are subject to legal discrimination, disenfranchisement, and social exclusion. The author begins by tracing the historical roots of racial caste in America, from slavery through Jim Crow, and shows how each system of control was replaced by a new form of racial subjugation. The war on drugs, launched in the 1980s, is pinpointed as a pivotal moment where the criminal justice system began to target Black communities disproportionately. Through a detailed examination of laws, practices, and the media's role, Alexander unveils the racial biases embedded in policing, sentencing, and incarceration. A significant portion of the book focuses on the devastating impacts of mass incarceration on African American communities. Alexander sheds light on how the label of felon strips individuals of their civil rights, including the right to vote, access to public housing, and employment opportunities. This legal discrimination perpetuates a cycle of poverty and marginalization, trapping individuals and communities in a state of perpetual disadvantage. Alexander's work is not just a critique, but also a call to action. She urges readers to rethink the criminal justice system and advocate for reforms that address the root causes of racial inequality. Her arguments challenge the notion of a colorblind society and emphasize the need for a collective awakening to the realities of racial injustice. The New Jim Crow is a powerful and provocative book that combines rigorous scholarship with passionate advocacy. It is an essential read for anyone seeking to understand the complexities of race, law, and justice in America, and it serves as a catalyst for discussions on how to create a more equitable society. Michelle Alexander begins The New Jim Crow by providing a historical overview of racial control mechanisms in America. She traces the evolution from slavery to Jim Crow laws, which enforced racial segregation and disenfranchised Black Americans. Alexander emphasizes that each system of racial control was succeeded by a new form of oppression, maintaining a racial hierarchy despite societal changes. The book's central thesis is that mass incarceration is the latest iteration of racial caste in the United States. Alexander identifies the war on drugs, initiated in the 1980s, as the catalyst for this system. Despite relatively stable drug use rates, the crackdown disproportionately targeted African American communities. Through laws that mandated harsh sentences for drug offenses, the prison population skyrocketed, with a significant racial disparity. Alexander delves into the mechanics of the criminal justice system, revealing how it systematically discriminates against Black Americans. She discusses the discretion granted to law enforcement, the biased use of stop-and-frisk tactics, and the prosecutorial power that leads to plea bargains disproportionately affecting minorities. The book highlights case studies and statistical data to illustrate these points, showing that racial bias is deeply embedded in these processes. One of the book's most compelling sections focuses on the collateral consequences of incarceration. Alexander argues that being labeled a felon leads to a lifetime of discrimination, effectively creating a permanent underclass. Formerly incarcerated individuals face legal barriers in voting, housing, employment, and education. This systemic exclusion perpetuates cycles of poverty and disenfranchisement, particularly in Black communities. Alexander critiques the notion of a colorblind society, arguing that it obscures the racial biases entrenched in the criminal justice system. She explains how the rhetoric of colorblindness has been used to justify policies that have devastating racial impacts. The book challenges readers to recognize and confront these biases, rather than denying their existence. In the concluding chapters, Alexander calls for a re-evaluation of the criminal justice system and offers pathways for reform. She emphasizes the importance of grassroots movements, legal challenges, and policy changes to address systemic racism. Alexander also highlights the role of public awareness and education in fostering a more equitable society. The New Jim Crow concludes with a powerful call to action. Alexander urges readers to recognize the connections between past and present forms of racial control and to work towards dismantling the current system of mass incarceration. She envisions a society where justice is truly blind and all individuals are treated with dignity and equality. Mass incarceration as racial control. The book argues that mass incarceration functions as a contemporary system of racial control, similar to slavery and Jim Crow laws, perpetuating racial hierarchy and social stratification. War on drugs. The war on drugs is identified as a significant driver of mass incarceration, disproportionately targeting African American communities despite similar rates of drug use across races. Systemic bias. The criminal justice system is shown to be rife with racial biases at every stage, from policing and arrest to sentencing and parole, resulting in disproportionate impacts on Black Americans. Legalized discrimination. Being labeled a felon results in legalized discrimination in voting, housing, employment, and other areas, creating a permanent underclass of marginalized individuals. Myth of colorblindness. The notion of a colorblind society is critiqued as a rhetorical tool that obscures and perpetuates racial biases, preventing meaningful discussions and reforms. Call to action. Alexander calls for comprehensive reform of the criminal justice system, emphasizing the need for public awareness, grassroots activism, and policy changes to dismantle systemic racism. Historical continuity. The book highlights the continuity of racial control mechanisms throughout American history, urging readers to recognize and address these persistent inequalities. Empowerment and advocacy. Empowering affected communities and advocating for their rights are essential steps towards achieving justice and equality in society. The New Jim Crow is a powerful indictment of the racial biases in the American criminal justice system and a compelling call for reform. It challenges readers to confront uncomfortable truths and work towards a more just and equitable society.
And that concludes Friday's Wacky book summary. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed this content, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. This book and many more can be found below in the description. You can support our community by engaging in the comments section and share if you think others would enjoy this content as well. Thank you again for visiting the channel, and we will see you around soon.